It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to the Breaking Average Show. This is Paul Gustafson, and joining me is my co-host, Rick Morris. Rick, it is so good to see you again. We had such a great discussion last week, and can't wait to get into this one. So
that's right. It's almost a continuation, of course. I mean, this has been fun to unpack these books, many that I've read before and haven't touched in years. So it's been really, really fun to dive in.
Yeah, and to your point, right? Some of these books we haven't picked up for a long time. We opened them back up, and we're seeing, I don't know for you, but I see new layers that I hadn't seen before. I see some of the old stuff, yes, but there are new things out of this. It's almost like a fresh new book. So,
well, it's significance of growth. I really feel that each book delivers what we need to hear at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. But what we needed to hear at the moment we read it the first time is different than what we need to hear or read the moment this time, so. Yeah,
exactly. It's a great point. So last week, it was such a fun discussion. We did the mentor leader. I have the book here today. And, there's a foreword in this book. And again, we're not going to be unpacking the foreword, the mentor leader, but in the foreword, Jim Caldwell does a great job kind of introducing Tony in the book and telling some stories. And one of the things he talks about is a great book that I know you love, that others love, and it's Jim Collin's book, Good to Great. And so why not let that be the book that we're going to be talking about today? And you picked this book out, right? So here it is, Good to Great. It is one of the, the book standards here as far as leadership, right? Don't you think?
Absolutely. And I mean, you can see right on the cover there, and I'm sure it's a lot more now. It says 3 million copies sold.
Yeah, this book is, yeah.
There's a lot of people who seek, how do we go from good to great? And this was, I love books that are based on research. I love books that really identify characteristics of not just who to be, but what to do. Right. Yeah. And that's what I think really spoke about this book. It's a lot of action in this of what to do to start to move organizations from being good organizations to great organizations. I just saw just saw this on TikTok. I don't know if you know, Simon Sinek is on TikTok now, and he's answering questions.
Oh, cool.
And we have this thing about the Great Resignation is this. I don't know if you've heard that term, but that's talking about, so many people are resigning from their jobs right now. And they asked Simon why he thinks that is. And he said, of course, there's the people. He says the prevailing theory is that because we've been giving so much in unemployment and all these other things, people just don't want to work. And he goes, I don't think that's it. And he goes, then there's people that are trying to find better positions. And he goes, and I think that has a lot to do with it. He goes, but I think the biggest reason of the Great Resignation is that because there's so much opportunity right now, the people are leaving toxic cultures. So instead of looking at the people who are resigning and saying, why are they moving on? You need to be looking at the company and saying, why aren't we creating a culture enough that makes them want to stay? And I think Good to Great speaks to that very thing right now. Like, I think this book is more relevant now than it was then, just because of what's happening.
I absolutely totally agree with you on that. And I know that people will say, well, gosh, some of these companies aren't actually around anymore that were identified great. Look, let's not get into that. The studies that they did, for the historical, just the research they did in this book was just phenomenal, right? And we can unpack some of that. But I love, really, there's 4 components to this book, guys, that I love, right? The first part really gets into this whole discussion of what's good versus great, understanding what that is. Rick, let's be honest. Every business, organization, church, ministry, team, whatever you want to call it, they want to be great, right? They want to go from good to great. Who wouldn't want that, right? And who wouldn't want to work for that company or be a part of that business or be attached to that team that is in that state of great? So we're going to be unpacking some of those things. How do you become good to great? And we're only going to scratch the surface in the course of our discussions today, because this book is pretty well packed. It was a #1 bestseller for a reason. But there's so many timeless things that are in here. I can't wait to get into. But 4 components. The first one that I just mentioned, what's good versus great. The second one is the bus and the path. We'll get into some discussion here shortly on that. And then the build up to breakthrough kind of stuff, the flywheel thing. So powerful. And he gets into more of the flywheel in that last bit of the book that he talks about creating a lasting revolution. So 4 components. So you ready to dive in a little bit more on this good? Why good is the enemy of great enough?
Exactly. And it's funny, you've talked about the bus on the podcast before.
Yeah.
You've talked about the flywheel on the podcast before. I mean, there's been so much influence in this book and just the way we think and talk. For me, it's a sequel. The first thing I remember in cracking this book, and it hit me again this time, is right out of the gate, he starts talking about the 5 levels of leadership, which to me is, if you get Maxwell's book, 5 levels of leadership, which I think does a phenomenal job of explaining what those 5 levels are. This book really picks up and starts with level 5 leadership and going through. And I love what he said. He said, for your own development, I would love to be able to give you a list of steps for becoming level 5, but we have no solid research data that would support a credible list. Our research then exposed level 5 as a key component inside the black box of what it takes to shift a company from good to great. So I love the fact that, right out of the gate, though, if you've read the 5 levels of leadership from Maxwell, this just becomes the sequel. This is the next thing once you've understood that book.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't married that up. I've looked at all the other Jim Collins books and they're good too, but 5 levels that's a great pre-start to this.
Yeah.
It really is. Here's an interesting thing is the findings, right? So again, they do research, they find things that are really interesting. And one of the findings is this: companies are afraid to go from good to great because they fear here's their fear. The fear is that they're afraid to go from good to bad. And I'm seeing that, right? Like, oh, it's working, twatty disease. Remember what Diane was sharing with us, right? We can't do that. That's not the way we've always done it. And this is what's been successful. And you see so many organizations who stumble and fumble, and they've had some success, and your success might be your doom if you're not careful, because you're going to think, well, we were successful this way. We'll do it again. Well, wait a minute. You're good, but you're not great. How do you get great? You got to be a continual learner, right? You got to continue to learn and sometimes take risk. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I found it interesting, even coming off of Tony Dungy's book last week. He talks about level 5 leaders share the praise in good times, but take the blame in bad times. But one of the things that I found really compelling was when he was talking about level 5 leaders, he says, level 5 leaders are never larger than life business celebrities. He said, because their awe-inspiring charisma can smother out the efforts of others. And I found that really interesting. It's not a hard and fast rule, because there are some larger than life, celebrities that do really good in that level 5 leadership. But if your goal of trying to get great is to only compel your name forward, then you're focused in the wrong direction.
Yes. And it's so easy to focus on the wrong direction, right? I mean, it happens all the time, right? We can get caught up in the current circumstances and situations and the environments that we have now. And like Dungy talks about in that book that we just did last week, we got to create that culture. That's what the mentor leader gets to do, is kind of carve and create that culture. And I think, he talks about Collins in this book talks about what's inside the black box, right? So you got good results and you want great results. What do you do inside that box to go from good results to great results? And their discoveries, again, they're studying different companies. Walgreens is one of them. Eckerd's is the one that didn't really kind of hit the great status. And it gets to the point you're talking about the celebrity leaders who write in from the outside are negatively correlated with taking a company from good to great. That's not true, right? Sometimes it's an inside job. You've got to grow inside. You've got to make that difference inside. You can't just bring somebody from the outside and say, okay, go make a difference. Now there certainly can be an impact if it's done right, but the opportunity to grow happens inside that box. So you want to unpack that a little bit more? Because I know we got a certain amount of time here.
Yeah,
we can't do it all.
I was gonna say we could. I'll get caught up there.
Yeah,
I think just kind of going in. I love just to componentize his book, right? So he talks about 6 concepts, right? The level 5 leadership, first who, then what, confront the true facts, the Hedgehog Concept,
yes,
culture of discipline, and technology accelerator. So getting into that who versus what. This one really spoke to me because, again, coming off of what we just said about Simon Sinek and the culture, what we talked about with Dungy, he says it becomes easier for a company to change direction to adapt to a changing world because people have joined the company primarily because of who they get to work with, not rather than what they get to do. I found that really, really compelling.
So it comes down to relationships.
Of course. Yeah. But it's more important to have a good relationships than what it is that we're physically doing. And if you built a culture that's done that, you can adapt to a changing world because people aren't just, they're not. And that right there was the tie to Tawati disease.
Yes.
That's why you're so tied to Tawati disease, is because you're focused on what you're doing, not who you're working with and what you're building.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it ties in, we talked about the black box here and some of his discoveries, like I mentioned, inside job, right? 10 out of 11 great CEOs come from inside the company. That's pretty interesting. No systematic pattern linking specific forms of executive compensation to the process of going from good to great. So executive compensation isn't, there's no systematic pattern linking that to a good to great. So don't get caught up in that per se, although that's important. Strategy per se did not separate the good to great companies from the comparison companies. And this is the one that kind of baffled me. Strategy didn't separate the good to great. But what he does say, and I think it does relate to strategy later on, it's just a different perspective of strategy. He says the good to great companies did not focus principally on what to do to become great. They focused equally on what not to do and what to stop doing. And this is where Scott Fay, one of my mentors, talked about creating a stop doing list. What should be, and early tip and challenge here, guys, what needs to be a part of your stop doing list? Because maybe there's some things that you've done that you thought, well, this is the way we've always done it, Tawati. But maybe some of those things need to be some things that you stop doing. So that's what they're talking about here. I do like the technology bit. We can get into that. He says technology-driven change has virtually nothing to do with igniting a transformation from good to great. I think back to your point, relationships, those matter. We'll get we can talk about the bus stuff.
Do your bus stuff. You love the bus.
I love the bus.
Let's revisit the bus.
Yeah, and so a few months back, I had a chance to talk to Coach Mosley. That's right. Last chance you. And by the way, Coach, congratulations on season 2 that you are just about to embark on. So can't wait to watch that. And at the end of season 1, he COVID has hit. It's hit all of us, but it's certainly hit that team, and they're ready to head, I think, to San Francisco. They're
literally on the bus to go to the championship, I believe.
Yeah, they're heading to the championship weekend, and Coach gets the call outside the bus that it's off. COVID has killed everything. So he gets on the bus and he has to tell his team. And it's heartbreaking. It's tough for him to do it. But what's really interesting, and I told Coach, he and I talked about it, I said, Coach, when you got on that bus, you had everybody on the bus that needed to be on that bus. You had worked all season long to put the right people on the bus, and there they were. And the lives that you impacted. Nobody's going to remember the wins and losses. They'll remember how you touched them, how you touched their heart. and he said, well, yeah, how they touched me. And so that's what it's all about, right? Relationships and making sure that you've got the right people on the bus and the right seats on the bus heading in the right direction. And so even though they didn't go to that championship weekend, they were able to really make, I think, step forward in their life. And maybe they'll watch The Last Chance U, the first season, and see just how they were influenced by that mentor leader of Coach Mosley. But I love that story, right? Because we get an opportunity to do that. And I'll unpack some more of the tidbits here. I got to pull up my notes on that. But getting that bus is so important. Getting the right people on that bus is so important. The who's in our life matter, not who, not how, right? As we've talked about before. It's another book, by the way. Who, not how. Who is in your life that needs to be in there? Who do we need to invite on to be able to join us? Who do we need to really mentor and spend time with and coach? And who do we need to listen to? Right. So these are all important parts of the bus. So what are your thoughts on this?
So the interesting finding that hit me when we're talking about the who, when he's saying first the who, then the what in this component, he says that if you have the right who, and the reason why that decision comes first is the challenge of motivating and managing people goes away. And when I read that for a second, I was like, wait, what are we talking about? But what he's saying is because the right people, if you have that right people on the bus, as you're talking about, they will be far more motivated by their desire to achieve and be part of something great. They won't need to be managed because they'll be naturally fired up. Now I think that's a little tongue in cheek in a way, but you won't have to worry about motivating people if you've set a vision and have the right people there to execute. They're going to go start executing. You don't have to motivate anybody to do anything because they're fired up at the mission. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, got to be fired up by the mission.
I'll keep talking on that one. Then.
Yeah,
he says, if it becomes obvious that you need to change people, right, you do it quickly. He goes, but the best people never need to be tightly managed. They will know instinctively what needs to be done without lengthy sets of instructions. So therefore, when good to great companies find someone that is underperforming, they first try and decide whether that person is better suited somewhere else, right? And so it's that even it comes back to like the bottom 10% rule. And we talked about that with Welch and what that did, because he took it too far. But the point is there's multiple books out there that says we spend too much time trying to focus on our underperformers that we forget to recognize and work with our achievers. Yeah. But in this case here, like the first thought of good to great isn't, well, what do I need to do to motivate this person? What do I need to do to get them to come up to speed? The first thought is maybe they're in the wrong job. And that's been a tenet of my management style for a long time. I don't believe that there's bad people. I believe that there's bad jobs for those people.
Yeah. So they may not be in the right seat.
That's right.
Right. So, yeah, I love his point that great vision without great people is irrelevant, right? You can have the best vision in the world, but if you don't have great people and they're not in the right seat, maybe you have all the right people, but they're just not in the right seat. How do you get them there? How do you get them there? Right. So when they're in the right seat, talks about trust, right? How do we get other people on the bus to trust one another? Well, get them in the right seat, give them the opportunity to be contributors in what they're doing and to add value and where their strengths are at. And yeah, I think it's really, really powerful. So many good things here.
He says, put the best people on the biggest opportunities, not the biggest problems. And I thought that was a nice kind of takeaway, the way that was said, because often, your star employees, the people that know everything, we do put them on problems. This is an issue. That's an issue. Let's go get this person. And really, we need to let other people figure out some of those problems, A, for learning, but B, like our greatest people need to be focused on our greatest source of opportunity so that we can continue to grow the company. And sure, we'll create more problems at that point and we'll solve them behind you, right? We've got the team to do it. But I think that's a cool key call out and focus is, am I putting my best people on the things that are growing the company, or am I putting my best people on things that are just keeping the company afloat?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that whole discussion on the right, but getting the best people, putting them on that bus is so good. I'm just looking at again my notes here. Get the best people, build them into the best managers in the industry, and accept the fact that some of them will be recruited to become CEOs of other companies. That part really kind of grabbed me. I don't know what your poll is on that, but to realize that, wait a minute, we're going to get the right people on the bus and we're going to try to build them up. But what happens if they leave? What happens if they leave? And I struggle with that one. I don't know if you did.
It's funny. I lost opportunities at consulting, but as we're using this bus analogy, the thing that it was, because I was kind of a solo practitioner in a lot of these things, the question that I always get is, what if you get hit by the bus? That was I've never put those two things together until now, Paul. So we're talking about this bus and on that side of the bus, and like, well, what if your best employee gets hit by a bus? Now what do you do? Right? It's just really interesting.
The other bus. I mean, we could have some bus analogies here.
Now I'm going to Johnny Dangerously. He rides the bus. She rides the bus. I'll ride the bus. You know what I'm talking about there?
You got hit by the bus. No, you got to be on the bus so you won't get hit by the bus. All right. So get them on the bus so they don't get hit by the bus. All right. If they choose to leave the bus, then they weren't meant to be there in the first place.
The bus is off the tracks.
The bus is off the.
All right.
We're having fun, guys. All right. But no, this is good. All right. So, but let's get the right people on the bus. You know, his key point is get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. Then figure out where to drive it. You know, so sometimes we need to cast vision, you know, where there's no vision, people perish. Get it. Important. But level 5 leader that you were talking about a moment ago, they're gonna figure out the who, then the where, right? Where we're going. Understand the second key point is understand the degree of sheer rigor needed in the people decisions in order to take a company from good to great. The rigor, right? There needs to be some work. There needs to be some focus, a focus by everybody. And how do you get that focus? Vision, mission, values. Those are important. But get the right people on. It's amazing what your team can do when they're brought together and they're given the right kind of challenge, and they realize, okay, yep, we're going to get everybody rowing in the same direction. We can do that, then boy, you can make an impact. All right, so bus, we had some fun with that.
something that I say all the time when I'm working with companies, though, is it's rigor, not rigor mortis. So rigor and rigor mortis is a very fine line where we put in policies to prevent certain things happening, but then those policies become why things are happening, right? There's a really fine line there. So, you know, my consulting there is always just enough process. That's what I say all the time is we need to put just enough process in so that we don't get rigor mortis. You ever read something that, Paul, and it reflects on something that, like, you know, you've been successful, you know, you've done certain things, but you haven't really been able to put in the words why. And then you'll read something, you'll be like, oh, that's why. And when I was reading in chapter 3, when he starts talking about disciplined thought, and this is in that buildup, and he's talking about confronting the true facts. He said, put in place a psychological duality. And I think this is the place I live in more than anything, especially in my job, because my job is to instill hope. And so what he says is, where on one hand, the psychological duality means where on one hand, people accept the realities of the marketplace, yet at the same time maintain an unwavering faith that the company will ultimately prevail, even if it takes many years to achieve. And like my whole psyche of a project manager, and I've said it here on the show too, is you give people enough time and money, we can do anything, right? We put a person on the moon, right? We did that. Which was seemingly impossible, but to me, there's that unwavering faith that we could do it, that it was possible, that ultimately drove us there. So you accept the realities that we don't know how we're going to get to the moon right now, and that everything that we're doing is a test, but there's the unwavering faith that we are going to accomplish that. And that's that duality that needs to exist.
Here, I've got something I want to pull on, want you to help me out with. All right. There's a comment. So what's wrong with this comment? You can't argue with 100 years of success. What's wrong with that comment?
Well, first of all, there's too much success. That's the first thing that I go to.
Yeah.
But you can argue with 100 years success because it's the way it's always been done.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can argue because look at Kodak.
That's right. Yep. Look at Pullman, right? Look at Kodak. Look at all the businesses that have now gone, we don't see them anymore.
GE
Why?
is struggling.
Right? Because what was success 100 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, before COVID, is not the success that you need today. It's not, so we have the definition of success keeps changing. It just does. And if it isn't, then you're going to fail. All right. So what's, and we talk about in Agile, what's your definition of done? Really what we're talking about isn't the definition of done. We're talking about what's the definition of success for this effort, for this project, for what we're doing, for what we're trying to accomplish and achieve. What's our definition of success? And if we're not reevaluating that definition frequently, then we're going to fail. So you're an Agile guy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And that's where I love the flywheel concept that he talks about too,
Yes.
is because we determine success in 2-week increments and not only that, but too much success. So for instance, I'm coming off of 9 straight sprints where we've lowered our cost per story point and then our planned cost per story point and then exceeded the velocity that we had projected. I'm not doing something right at that point. If there's 9 straight sprints where we've done that, I mean, that's great and we could be rewarding, but that means I haven't challenged the team enough. We either need to meet, and sometimes we need to miss, certain velocities to understand how to grow. So I don't know. That's what hits me when you say that.
Yeah. And I want to get into the flywheel, but this Jim Collins quote, boy, this rocked me. I love it. Here it is, guys. He says, there is nothing wrong with pursuing a vision for greatness. After all, the good to great companies also set out to create greatness. But the good to great companies continually refine the path to greatness with the brutal facts of reality. Jim Collins. And so what he's saying, guys, is look, take time, observe what's going on, right? Yes, have a vision for greatness, but realize the fact that you've got things that are happening in front of you, things that others on the bus. Make sure you're not the only one. Make sure others are seeing it, recognizing, observing it, finding it, see something, say something. Observe what's going on. What are the brutal facts of reality? The reason why Chick-fil-A survived COVID so much stronger than everybody else is because they continue to refine the path. They continue to look at the brutal facts of reality. Guys, we're a chicken restaurant that serves 120 people in our room, in our store at any moment in time, and we can't open our doors to feed people. But we got a kitchen, we got a staff, we got the right people on the bus. We're gonna have to reposition a little bit, but we're going to leverage everybody's strength, and we're going to find a way to serve the people as they drive by in their cars. We're going to serve them through the drive-through lines. We're going to have actually parking spots where they can use the mobile app. We're going to update our app so that people can actually order their food and they can just show up into a designated parking spot and just let us know they're there, and we'll bring the food out to them. We'll have other means and mechanisms to feed them, and they survived. Whereas other restaurants, at least in our area, some of them went under, some of them closed up for a long period of time. They're back in business, but there are a few that never came back. Point is, we've got to be aware of what's going on. All right. So to get to greatness, it's good to have that lofty vision. Fantastic. It's important, but realize that there's going to be some zigs and zags, like Michael Hyatt talks about in the Vision Driven Leader. There's going to be some zigs and zags to get to where you need to go, and you need to have everybody eyes on, seeing what's happening, being willing to adjust and pivot and make this thing happen. All right. So I just wanted to share that Jim Collins quote.
Well, but that aligns with one of the things he talks about further, which is a culture of discipline.
Yes.
Right. And so it's it's not there's a lot of hope there, and there's a lot of that, but that culture of discipline that Chick-fil-A had that say, we're going to do it. So you had that unwavering faith that they were going to prevail, but at the same time, there was a lot of discipline that was, okay, we've got to stop all of these other activities and focus on the things that are going to move the needle. Right. And so he talks about building a culture of freedom and responsibility, but it still needs to be within a well-defined framework. Right.
Yeah.
You still have to know that you have the people that are going to have the self-discipline to go through these extreme areas to fulfill their responsibilities. But that comes down to more strong culture than dictatorship.
Yeah. Yeah. And he talks about the Stockdale paradox, right? So this ties in with that, Admiral Stockdale. And I could tell a story of being a POW, not me, but one of my mentors, Red McDaniel, was with Stockdale at Hanoi Hilton. But that's sort of where that well, here's the Stockdale. What is it, right? What's the Stockdale paradox? It's retaining the faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties. And at the same time, it's not just that, but at the same time, confronting the most brutal facts of the current reality, wherever they might be. All right. So having a vision for what can be, should be, and that you're going to prevail in the end, but realizing that, hey, you know what, there's some things that are happening here. We have to just confront those too. It's the mindset. There must be a way for us to prevail as a great company, for us to prevail as a POW, and we'll find it. We're going to find a way to do it. We're going to do it together. That's it. That's the Stockdale paradox, and I love it.
Yeah, to me, that's defined hope instead of blind faith.
Yes.
Right.
That's it.
As we're building this culture of discipline, I like what Jim said too. He said, though discipline by itself will not produce great results, we find plenty of organizations in history that had tremendous discipline and marched right into disaster with precision and in nicely formed lines. The point is to first get self-disciplined people who engaged in very rigorous thinking, who then take disciplined action within the framework of a consistent system designed around what he calls the Hedgehog Concept.
Yeah, let's get into the Hedgehog. This is great. So, if we were in the room, I'd ask everybody, how many of you have heard of the Hedgehog Concept? All right. So let's get into it. Good to great companies are hedgehogs. All right. He says the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. Foxes can become scattered, diffused, and inconsistent. Hedgehogs focus on a single idea, not distracted, easily defend single in a they don't easily defend themselves in a single position in the marketplace. They take a complex world and simplify it. That's the key point. They take a complex world and simplify it. That's what a hedgehog, that's what this whole concept is. And so he introduces that. He does this comparison of a hedgehog and a fox, and I just share a little bit of that. But to go from good to great requires transcending the curse of competence. And he says that it doesn't mean that you can't be, what this means is that you can be the best in the world, right? So just because something is in your core business, just because you've been doing it for years, does not mean you can be the best in the world at it. If you cannot be the best in the world at your core business, then your core business cannot form the basis of a great company. It must be replaced with a simple concept that reflects deep understanding of three intersecting circles. So those circles are
they're what your company can be at best in the world at.
Yeah.
What your people feel the most passionate about.
Yep.
And what drives your economic engine to generate profits.
Yeah. So important. Go through those one more time, Rick, because I've got a, maybe we can show a visual here. We'll put that on our website, but that hedgehog concept, those three circles, and then that center port, just go through those again.
Yep. So what can you be the best in the world at? What factor truly drives your economic engine, right? And what are your people deeply passionate about? Those are your three circles.
Yep. And then the intersection of it's kind of like a Venn diagram. Your true missions and programs should be right in the center point.
That's right.
So that's the hedgehog concept.
And a powerful one at that.
Yeah, I love it. This is good. He tells some good stories in the book on that. I think we probably hit that one. I got more notes on that, but whew, it's tough.
It is. It is. How do you do this in 45 minutes?
Yeah, the examples that I have, who are today's hedgehogs in industry? Here's my list. I got Netflix, Chick-fil-A, Amazon, Starbucks coffee, Apple, Lego. Those are just a few.
Nice. Yep. And very good at what they do.
Yep.
Even even you take the concept of Legos, they've been around for a while. So how do you inspire a new generation of Lego builders? And they came up with this show called Lego Masters, which is insane, right?
Yep.
But even then, you're like, watch how creatively they build this stuff and what they can build with that. And I think that inspires a whole new generation. So what are you good at? You're good at building stuff. Let's just show it in a different way. Let's show people who are great at building it, so that people that pick up the hobby again. That's a perfect example of staying focused at what you're good at.
Yeah. And it starts with that hedgehog concept, guys. It's the turning point in the journey from good to great. Get that, the hedgehog concept, you're on the right path. You got the bus heading in the right direction, right? So your bus, you got the right people. You got to figure out what direction you need to go. Hedgehog concept, that gets you in the right direction. Now we need to keep the wheels going. And that takes us to the next part, which is the flywheel. You want to dive into that?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So the flywheel, let me see if I got my notes here on this. Sorry, guys. Yeah, lots of hedgehog stuff. This is good. I didn't realize how many notes I had. I've unpacked this book a few times over the last few years. And so I keep building onto it. And today is another one where I've added more concepts to it. But there's this last section here of the book that, I call technology and the flywheel. And the flywheel is okay, right? So the breakthrough is the hedgehog concept, but how do we keep that going? How do we keep this moving? How do we have the discipline action and create that culture of discipline and the technology accelerate, all those other pieces that we want to bring into it? This part of the book is, there's a separate add-on book that I saw a couple of years ago on this whole thing on the flywheel. And if you get a chance, you can go buy just a really thin book on the fly. I forget what its title. It's Jim Collin. It looks like it's almost got the same cover. It's a flywheel book, but the flywheel is a metaphor on how great businesses execute. Okay. It builds momentum. Right. So think of it, and maybe we can show an image or two, and we'll stick this on our website. But think of the key objectives and components. Right. These components are next action steps on a list. Essentially, they're inevitable consequences of the step that come before it. Right. So there's a flow to it. You got arrows, and it builds some momentum, and it continues on, and it goes a little faster and better. Right. So there's some great examples, like in the book. Let me see. There's the Amazon.com flywheel that we'll put on our website. So you can see sort of their flywheel in terms of lower prices on more offerings. And then the next step is increase customer visits. Okay. So they continue to build on the last. And the next bit is to attract third-party sellers. That's what they were doing, Amazon. And then the next bit is expand the score, extend distribution. And then the next one is grow revenues per fixed costs. And then they go back, right? It continues. Lower prices, more offerings, increase customer visits, and so forth and so on. So we'll show a couple of those flywheels and put those on our website. I got more. We'll put, let's see, we've got the Amazon.com flywheel. We've got Intel flywheel. We have Vanguard. Those are just a few, and I may have a couple more.
But the point of it is that it's repeatable steps.
Yes.
That you can continue to build momentum, and then that momentum builds on itself. Thus, that's the flywheel.
Yeah. He talks about 7 steps in the book, guys. And again, we don't have time to unpack it all, but you test the flywheel against the 3 circles of your hedgehog concept. Yep. That's how you test it. So you can build this out like, all right, all these steps that Rick had just mentioned, but how do you know that it's right? Well, test it against the hedgehog concept. What are you deeply passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? What drives your economic or resource engine? Do all those things fit that? How so? In what way? And once you get that, then you've got really something that's really compelling, very powerful. My wife created a really cool flywheel for her business, and it's given her just alignment, So if you want alignment in your business and you want everybody on the bus that's part of your team heading in the right direction, making an impact, work on that, have that clarity, because that creates alignment with everybody. So everybody's on the same page.
And so the point is, first of all, I love books that are based on research, that you can look at some examples and be able to identify with those examples to help make the concepts a little bit clearer. But I think my last point on this, Paul, is it was a great quote that's in the book. And he says, when all the pieces come together, not only does your work move towards greatness, but so does your life. For in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it's a meaningful life. And it is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Perhaps then you might gain that rare tranquility that comes from knowing that you've had a hand in creating something of intrinsic excellence that makes a contribution.
Yeah,
I really love that.
Yeah, I love that too. That's good, man. Some good stuff. Yeah, we do need to land the plane on this. So you want to dive into the tip and challenge?
For sure. Mine's super easy. I might even be stealing yours, but first the tip is to understand the flywheel and why it's so important. And then the challenge is to make your own. Like, what is it that you're going to do? And there should be, to me, there's two flywheels. There's the flywheel of your business so that you can be doing meaningful work, but then there's the flywheel and coming back to what Scott Fay says about what should we stop doing? I don't know how many times when I'm coaching somebody and they're telling me that they don't have time, or that, my excuse all the time was I didn't have the time to work out. I didn't have the time to go to the gym until I just did. I just said, you know what, and I blocked it off on my calendar. Everybody knows when it is. In fact, you respect time because often I'm leaving for the gym as soon as we wrap up this podcast. Everybody knows what time I'm going. All of a sudden, I just made the time. You don't find it, you decide it. Right. By not doing other stuff. What did I give up for 3 hours? 3 hours a week is what I've been doing in the gym. 3 hours a week is it. And I mean, that's Netflix right there. You know what I mean? Like, I easily can find this time. So my challenge to you is to develop the flywheel. What are you not going to do? And what are you going to start doing, both personally and professionally, to move that momentum?
I love that tip and challenge, guys. I want to encourage each of you guys to think about your flywheel. Spend some time on that. If you just do this one exercise alone and kind of understand your hedgehog, right, just to validate it, boy, that's going to make a big difference in your life. And I love your approach to doing it. A couple of things just to add to that, right? He shows kind of a yin and a yang kind of image in the book here on what to preserve. All right. So think about the things that you need to preserve. Recognize that good to great companies don't always get stuck on what they used to do that made them successful. They don't get stuck on twatty disease. All right. But there are some things that you need to preserve, and they need to be your core values and your core purpose. Make sure that you have those right. Preserve that no matter what. But here's what you need to change. Maybe you need to change your cultural principles and your operating principles, right? You might need to change those, right? We're in a different world. Chick-fil-A had to change some things to be successful in this COVID world, and they'll have to change again, right? They're preserving their values, their core values, they're preserving their purpose, but they've done other things to be able to serve and add value. What do you need to change? What are your specific goals and strategies that you need to change? What do you need to stop doing, as Rick just mentioned? Those are key things. So that's my tip and challenge. Again, we'll put some more resources on our Breaking Average website, but man, this is such a good book. And we've scratched the surface only on this thing, man, because there's so many nuggets that we could just dive in. We could have done a 4-week series on this book, I think.
And there's a reason why, multiple millions of copies of this book has been sold. No doubt.
No doubt about it. Guys, we want you to be good. And we don't want you just to be good. We want you to be great. All right. And that's why when we pick books like this, Good to Great or Mentor Leader, like we did last week, or any of these fantastic books, the intent is what? Breaking average. We want you to take it to the next level. We believe that there's something more, there's something greater for you to do. And it's all about breaking average. And we're here to encourage you and challenge you in that area. We would love your feedback. Go to our website, breakingaverage.com. Support these authors. Each of these authors, these books that we have, they've spent an enormous amount of time and research putting something together in front of you. And we've done our very best to kind of share some of the tidbits and highlights of it. And hopefully this has added value to you. We encourage you to go to our website, go to any of our podcast platforms that are out there. We're on all the major ones, right? Is there one that we're not on as far as our audio for the podcast? Yeah, we're out there. Tell others about it, guys. Share this with somebody. Feel free to give us a comment, some feedback. But we want to make this thing better. We look for change ourselves. There are some things that we're going to preserve as far as values and purpose, but there's some things that we will always continue to change because we always want to get better and break average. And we want to encourage you to do the same. So thank you for being a part of our show and watching. And we look forward to connecting with you. Rick, this has been fun again, man.
Absolutely. And once again, I'm inspired by our mission of breaking average. So tune in again next week, either on Empowered Living or on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R² Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.